Now this might seem a little odd. I've brought together an MG dealer forecourt. No, I promise you, we're not making an ad for MG, although the winner of an all MG group test is likely to be an MG. But there is method to my madness, I promise. The thing is, we know that you guys are really interested in MG's electric cars. And if you do want a pure electric MG, then actually all three of these are proper contenders, but they're quite different. However, they cost about the same. So which one is the best? Well, that's the question that we do get asked a lot. So let's try and figure it out. But first, you know what to do. Please do remember to like, subscribe and turn those notifications on. We do really appreciate it. And do let us know in the comments below which MG is going to suit you best, or perhaps there's another car that does the same job but better. We can't wait to hear from you. So here we have the MG4, the MG5 and the MG ZS, the hatch, the small estate and the medium SUV. Now you can only have the MG5 as a long range model. So we're going to look at like for like and the SE long range versions of each car. Now I've got a bit of a price list here, and at the time of filming an MG4 costs £29,495 for the SE long range. An MG5 weighs in at £30,995 and the MG ZS £32,995, both for SE long range. Now there are standard range versions of both the MG4 and ZS that cost less, and the bigger spec trophy versions of all three that cost more. Okay, so first let's kick off with styling. Okay, I get it, it's kind of subjective, but personally, I think the MG4 looks the most modern, probably because it is actually the newest. Now, despite the ZS and MG5 getting a facelift and improvements, I think it is the MG4 that looks the least frumpy. The MG5 is fine from the front and back, but from the side profile, it's a bit awkward if I'm honest. And there's nothing offensive about the ZS, but the mid-size SUV shape, well, it's always going to limit how interesting it can look, in my opinion. Now there is actually a rumour of another ZS facelift on the way, so I'm looking forward to seeing that one. So overall, my rating goes to the MG4 for looking the nicest at the moment, and then between these two, I'll go ZS and probably the MG5 last. In terms of looks, let me know in the comments below how I got this completely wrong. But let me know not necessarily which one you would buy, but which one you think is the most attractive at this point. Right, next, let's talk interiors and practicality. Now, again, on this one, I think the MG4 and the MG5 lead the way because they've got more recent interior designs and they just feel fresher. And although the ZS is functional, it just doesn't have the same amount of space as the two newer cars, but they are all pretty well equipped. So the two newer cars get a 10.25-inch screen each. The ZS slightly smaller at 10.1, but they all get the iSmart app. Now that allows you to do things like pre-start the climate control system, so you can get the car nice and toasty on cold, miserable, snowy days like this. And also you can schedule charging. So then you can make use of cheap overnight electricity tariffs. The safety assistance kits, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto functionality is really good. But overall, I think the MG4 feels a little bit bigger in the rear, more so than the MG5. And that, I think, is because the MG5 wasn't designed from the outset to be pure electric, unlike the MG4. That was always going to be an electric car. And that's the same with the ZS. This comes with engine versions. So compromises have been made. You know, right here where the transmission would go, there's no additional cubby holes for storage and space. So I think, yeah, overall, this slightly lacks in terms of space efficiency. Also, one thing to note, none of them come with a frunk. Sad face. Now this is quite interesting because the MG4 has the smallest boot with the seats up at 363 litres, which is kind of to be expected. But seats folded, it has a bigger total volume than the ZS with 1,177 versus 1,166. Okay, there's not much in it, but the ZS does have a bigger normal boot at 448 litres, which isn't that much smaller than the overall biggest, the MG5, which has a 479 litre boot with the seats up and a 1,367 litres with the seats folded. Now, in terms of space, they aren't actually that far away from each other. It just depends on what you use the car for. Better backseat space? The MG4 is probably the one. Overall capacity though, it has to be the 5. The ZS, despite looking like the bigger car, isn't actually that much bigger. But it's easier to get in and out of because it's a bit taller. You get in rather than down. And the 5 in ZS will be okay for dogs, whereas the 4 might struggle. Okay, so when it comes to driving, let's kick off with this, the MG4. Now remember, this is the only car designed from the outset as an electric vehicle. Now, it's the heaviest of the 3, surprisingly. It's also rear-wheel drive, and it has the most power at just over a whopping 200 brake horsepower. But you can actually feel all of that while driving. The weight is kind of always present, but I think there's enough torque, there's enough power to actually make the drive feel quite perky. I'm really enjoying it, actually. Worth noting, it's a smidge slower than the MG5 from 0 to 62 miles per hour, although I think it feels faster. I don't know, maybe MG are underplaying the figures a bit, but that's what it feels like to me. Now, the rear-wheel drive platform does make a difference, whereas the other 2 MGs get the job done without a fuss. The MG4 makes things fun. It's really fun to drive. The steering's quick, it makes the car turn positively, and the body control is good. So the car follows the steering just as it should. It's also got the best turning circle. Very useful when you're doing 3-point turns in tight city streets, having gone in the wrong direction. It's also a tiny bit quieter as well. Not too much difference, but worth noting. Now, brake regen. It's not quite as aggressive as I would like it. No one pedal braking, that's for sure. But if you are looking for a car that's vaguely fun to drive, then I think this is the one that sets itself apart from the rest. That is, of course, until MG's 2-seater sporty little number turns up, which we are very excited about test driving soon. And so is this, the MG5. Now this is another car that does everything perfectly acceptably. It's got a smaller battery than the ZS, more on that in a minute, but the same power outputs. So, 154 brake horsepower and 207 pounds per foot of torque, but it's noticeably a bit quicker. Where the ZS gets from 0 to 62 miles per hour in 8.4 seconds, this takes 7.7. It's faster than the MG4, even though that car has more power. In fact, it's the fastest all round with a top speed of 115 miles per hour, which isn't really that relevant, is it? So 7.7 seconds to 62 miles per hour is cool and all that, but this is a small family car, so dashing about really isn't the remit, is it? And maybe that extra energy would be better spent extending the usable range. Horses for courses and all that. Otherwise, it's reasonable to drive. The steering is a bit lacking in feel, and the brake regen could be stronger. Plus, on those wheels, the ride is a little chunky on bad roads. But it really does work if you're just running around. I do think the old one rode slightly better, but anyway, this is a solid car from MG, and even though you might not be showing off about it, you won't be embarrassed either. Now last, but by no means least, the MG ZS. Now there's one motor that drives the front wheels, and although it's not hugely powerful, at 154 brake horsepower, it's enough to get the ZS to 62 miles per hour from rest in under 8.5 seconds, which again is perfectly acceptable. And that's the theme with the rest of the car, to be honest. Nothing stands out in terms of being bad or particularly inspiring, but it's an absolutely solid performance. There is brake regen and the steering is a bit slow but very safe. Traction's good and the ride isn't going to make you feel seasick, though it will pick up some bumps if the road is really bad. And well, let's face it, UK roads, they're not the best, are they? One big advantage of the SUV body style is that it's much handier for getting kids in and out of, especially if they're in child seats. Small details, but it all matters. So overall, a solid rather than special performance. Now, when it comes to range and charging ability, it's slightly odd to see all 3 MGs offering something different. And it's the MG5 that comes in third, with the smallest usable battery size of 57.4 kilowatt hours. It's not a huge surprise that it also has the lowest WLTP range of just under 250 miles. Now that's not bad, but it's only supported by 87 kilowatt peak DC charging, which means a 42-minute stop to get it from 10 to 80% charge, so that's from 23 to 180 miles of range. Now anything with a 4 at the front of that number these days is considered slow, so that's not great. There's also only 7.4 kilowatt AC charging, so the bigger AC chargers won't be as useful as they could be. Oh, and we're talking 9 hours, 15 minutes on the average home wall box. Now the ZS, on the other hand, has the biggest battery here at 68.3 kilowatt hours and a very respectable 273 miles of WLTP range. Now that's not bad at this price point. It's also got a higher peak fast charge than the 5 at 94 kilowatts, meaning that you're going to be looking at 37 minutes from 10 to 80%, adding the same amount of miles, but 5 minutes faster, woohoo, with the same 7.4 kilowatt AC ability. Not groundbreaking, but it's fine. The MG Star is the 4 though, again designed from the outset as an electric car. It might only have the same 7.4 kilowatt AC capability as the other cars, but supports 135 kilowatt DC charging. So on a big enough charger, you're looking at 34 minutes from 10 to 80%, which is better, and as we know, every minute counts. That charge fills up a 61.7 kilowatt hour battery that gives 280 miles of WLTP range. Only 7 more than the ZS, but from a smaller battery, don't forget, it'll be the most convenient to do a long journey in, even if by a small margin over the ZS. All right, so there you have it, a bit of a rundown of what these MGs have to offer. Anything else worth mentioning? Well, they can all tow, and you can get vehicle to load charging at 2.2 kilowatts for all of them, which is always quite a useful thing to have, I think. They all get a 7-year warranty, which is excellent if you think about it. And they also will perform really well in the residuals game. So the monthly cost can be quite cheap compared to some electric cars, but make sure you do shop around a bit. And the prices are changing a bit at the moment, so it's hard to give exact figures in this video. Wise to also note that as we film this, there appears to be really good availability on the MG4 and 5. It still wobbles a little bit on the ZS, and at the moment I think availability supply is so crucial at the moment if you're looking for an electric car. But do keep those second-hand values in mind. All right, so this is it. Which MG would I go for, all things being equal? Well, I guess everyone has their own needs, right? So they will suit a particular car over another, but generally, I think the ZS feels like the oldest, and it's not massively space efficient as that SUV shape might have you believe. Similarly, unless you really need the extra storage space that the MG5 offers, then I think the MG4 is a better package overall. Faster charging, better efficiency, better cabin space, and a more modern design. So yeah, you guessed it, the MG4 gets it for me. It's also pretty big with the seats folded, and would you believe, it's the cheapest. Although, small caveat, if I was thinking with my practical mum mind, I might have to go for the MG5 if I'm storing travel cots, pushchairs and all the paraphernalia. But ultimately my heart is with the MG4. Did I get it right? Let me know in the comments below. What would you go for? Because we love to hear your opinions, because most of the time you do disagree with what I have to say. Thanks for that one. Now, as ever, if you want to know anything at all about electric cars, then please do visit us at electrifying.com. Over in the other corner of the internet, we've got all the information on MGs and their competitors and plenty of other useful stuff. See you there.